Hello, my darlings and viewers. Welcome to another video on 40k, and today I'm joined by Proxy Hammer. So we are talking about Battle Sisters and Eldar. Naturally, I got the foremost Eldar expert I could think of, and I'll be covering the Battle Sister side. So, say hello.
How's it going, everybody? Thank you for having me on the channel.
No problem. Right. So we're looking at the Battle Sisters and Eldar. They have some similarities, not just necessarily in gameplay, but in being beaten down every single time. They have the lowest toughness in the game at toughness 3, and I went through all of the different units I could think of. Termagants, Spore Mines, the Tiny Ripper Swarms, Brimstone Horrors, Gretchen. None of them have a toughness lower than the Eldar and Battle Sisters. So we're definitely one of the weakest ones. Yep.
You know, that wasn't always the case. Back in the day, way back, there was Toughness 2 models.
Yeah, Toughness 2 Gretchen was only an edition ago, and if you go way back to 2nd edition, Toughness 4 Battle Sisters.
Yeah. Yeah, the Battle Sisters were, they were no joke, man. I remember them back then, too. They were nasty. There was a lot of
did you actually
weird
play
things
in
you could do with
edition?
them. I played a little bit as a kid, but I mostly revisited it when I was older because when I got into the game, it was at the very end of 2nd edition. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Rules, man. I just knew the models looked cool, and that's about it. I was like, all right, put my models on the table. Let's do this. Didn't know
my battles.
Game, and I was
battles about that time were like 10 models at most per army.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Actually, it's funny. My first army wasn't even Eldar. It was Imperial Guard because my buddies convinced me to buy Imperial Guard instead. I was always interested in the Eldar, though. I immediately went up to their Guardian box set, and was like, I want these guys. And I remember my buddies like, no, don't play those guys, man. You got to play these guys. And I was like, oh, who are these guys? And they were like the Catachans, you know, with the big muscles and stuff.
Oh, yes, big muscle men. Oh, but
I
love that
Guardian
these box.
Guys, you know.
The tall banana heads.
Yeah. You know, got to rep those Catachans. You know, that was my first couple of box sets were Catachans. And I remember putting them on the battlefield and having no clue what they did. I just knew that they had knives, and I was like, I want to attack with a knife. And the guy was like, you can't. You're not in melee. And I was like, okay. What can I do with these guys?
And 2nd edition, it took quite a while to get to melee.
Yeah, true. Unless you were like Tyrannid or something, you know, it was just so, the game was so lopsided back then. I think like going back to it, especially with a couple of my buddies as a older adult, I realized that, you know, people complain about game balance now, but things in 2nd edition were so broken. I digress, but you know, Wraithguard, their D weapons were just absolutely insane. Could kill things within transports if you rolled a certain number. Just weird stuff that you would never see now, you know. But
so thinking of them and your army currently, what do you sort of play right now? What's your sort of go-to list at this moment for Eldar?
Well, to be honest with you, I've been a real big fan of the Swift Strikes lists. So either Swift Strikes and Masterful Shots or Swift Strikes and Children of the Open Skies have been some of the most fun lists I've played.
So not one of the traditional Craft Worlds right now.
Yeah. Craft Worlds is, well, I've been playing Craft Worlds basically since 3rd edition. I started out with Imperial Guard, but, you know, I couldn't stay with them, honestly, because I was so intrigued by the Eldar. And every time I went into that store, I was like, I wonder how these guys play. So I eventually did pick them up. But yeah, I've just always really liked that fast play style. I was always interested in the Wind Riders. I always thought they were really cool models.
The hit, do damage, get out of there kind of tactics.
Yeah. And they used to have a rule where they could do that basically every turn. They basically had battle focus. And a lot of people...
Yeah, before battle focus existed.
Yeah, exactly. They were the battle focus faction. If you wanted to do battle focus, you picked up a bunch of Wind Riders because they could move 6 inches in the assault phase. which was awesome.
Which edition was that? 5th edition or 6th edition?
That was 5th edition and before. So 4th as well. And 6th edition, they changed it. In 6th, you couldn't do it anymore. They lost their little move that they could do. And instead, everything gained battle.
Jump pack units got it then. They were the unit that got that.
Yeah, that's right. Jet bikes got it. I don't know if all jump pack units got it. I think jet pack units. See, this is the weird thing, right?
Compared to jump pack because they were made different.
Yeah, because the Tau were jet pack, which meant that they could move into the soul phase, and jump pack was you could move 12 inches in the movement phase instead of 6.
That was when I think Eldar were nasty.
Yeah,
it was the bikes. Well, the scatter bikes and jet bikes being great, and all the Eldar shenanigans. That's when it was like, oh, Eldar's OP now.
Oh yeah, Eldar in 6th edition. I remember when their codex came out. I had worked with a 4th edition codex for like years and years and years. Like that 2006 codex lasted the last part of 4th edition all the way through 5th edition, and a little bit in 6th edition as well.
So you're getting like 6 years out of it, maybe more.
Yeah. Yeah, it was basically that. It was like a 7-year-old book. And my God, it was fun, but it was janky as hell. It was like running an army with 1/4 of the units available to it.
Yeah, there was definitely one play style that worked. I'm noticing at the moment for Eldar players I played against, and I don't know if it's something I've mentioned in a video already or one that I've recorded but haven't uploaded yet. Wraithguard.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone is doing Wraithguard at the moment with one Farseer as their only non-Wraith unit to do Fortune and Guide. And that's it.
Really? That's that. You're in the UK, right?
That's right.
There must be a different meta in the UK. There must be a little bit of a different meta.
Country metas as well, because in Australia for the longest time it was demons. Everyone ran demons, and then if anyone turned up in Australia with grey knights, suddenly they were like, "Whoa, you're countering the meta just by existing."
That's so funny.
What are you seeing then in North America?
I mostly have seen people running ulthwe in my local.
Yeah, it might be Wraithguard plus ulthwe. I know it's the Yanden style, but they may be picking Craftworld ulthwe. They get the reroll 1 wound roll and a 6+ invulnerable save and something else for psychic. Is that right?
Yeah, they get +1 to psyche tests. The first one. So the first psyche test you cast each turn, you get a bonus to it, +1 to cast, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, especially if you're going to use Fortune and Guide.
Yeah, absolutely. With Eldrad, right?
Oh yeah.
Eldrad
any Farseer, but especially him.
Yeah. He's the guy, he's the man. He's the elf.
The elf, really yes. Cool. So is that the sort of thing you're seeing in your gaming groups?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing mostly Hail of Doom or ulthwe. And that's the meta here in the States, at least in where I live in the States. It could be different in different states, who knows?
But I hear it's a big country.
Yeah. Yeah, I think things here are a little bit different also than other places in the US. But, I've been a big fan of ulthwe too. I prefer in the later editions, like now, or not editions, but, later 9th edition, I prefer Swift Strikes just because it's more dynamic than the ulthwe. But the ulthwe is still pretty fun. I remember when the codex first dropped, the first thing I thought about was, it would be really cool to run an ulthwe list that's really defensive and has a lot of support weapons in it. And I remember on my channel saying it multiple times, ulthwe is good. Like, this is before Hail of Doom got nerfed and people were just playing Hail of Doom and they were like, Eldar is just Hail of Doom competitively. And I was telling people, no. ulthwe is really good, guys. You're not understanding this. Look at this ability that they can do in combination with support weapons. With the Black Guardian stratagem, they can basically boost support weapon D-cannons up to ballistic skill 3. If they're shooting out of sight, they're still going to hit on, they're still going to hit on 3s with it. Obviously, if you do have line of sight, you hit on 2s at that point. But
yeah,
you can also get rerolls with Rangers. Rangers are a really meta unit to use. These
just
D-cannons
objectives at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Get into the mid board, prevent enemies from kind of infiltrating against you, prevent those, sneaky gits from getting to you.
The
I can't
Genestealer
remember.
Cult, just as a
Yeah,
whole.
absolutely. Yeah, like all those units that can just dogpile you early in the game, just completely nullified. And then you could just have fun with support weapons and defensive abilities and all that good stuff. And people are like, nah, but 6 is the hit auto wound, man, with the shuriken rule. That's way better. And then it got
Ulthwe
nerfed.
is what I have. Because I've
Oh,
got an
you run
Eldar
ulthwe?
army upstairs.
Oh, cool. Ulthwe. That's
Yep,
tight, dude.
all painted black, bone
That's
armor,
that's great.
heavy on the Guardians.
That's cool. Yeah, I miss when Guardians were good. I think they're going to make a return in 10th edition. I think they really
Definitely. I think
Yeah,
people are going to be swapping out Rangers and Bike Rangers and going for just Guardians. Maybe not Assault Guardians, because they've never been good, but regular Guardians, certainly.
Yeah, you're right. They've never been good. I remember my buddy used to run a squad of Storm Guardians back in 4th edition, and he literally just ran them because he thought they looked cool, but they were never good. And every time they did something remotely useful, it was a huge celebration.
Oh, yeah.
It was like the craft worlds had returned, the Eldari race had revived. I mean, it was just so
the Empire's
so
returned. Yeah. Right, so Fate Dice and Miracle Dice, as they are in 9th edition, quickly explain how it works, because I know you get to roll a certain number of dice at the start of the game, and they're automatic 6s.
Yeah, so how it works is basically you roll 12 dice in the beginning, and each of those dice can be used to substitute a roll throughout the game. So if you roll 3 4s out of your 12 dice, those 3 4s can be used for any roll to substitute before you roll. So you have to do it before you declare your roll.
Yep.
And this is something that is similar to Strands of Fate now. You have to declare it beforehand. And then
this is the 10th edition roll, isn't it?
Yeah. What was that?
This is for the 10th edition rolling.
Yeah. You roll 12 dice for 10th edition. Yeah. It worked a little different in the current edition, but yeah, in 10th you roll 12, and that's what you have for the rest of the battle. So you don't generate 4 per turn as you do now. You just get all of them at once in the beginning.
Because the 4 per turn is dependent on your army size?
Yes, it is. So in Strike Force games, currently 2,000 point games, basically 1,000 to 2,000 points, you get 4. In anything less than that, you get less dice.
Yeah.
So,
and then I assume if you go to like the onslaught missions, you'll get even more.
Yeah.
That's just the number that you keep, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
You know what, though? Believe it or not, I don't know if you get more than 4 ever. No matter if you're on onslaught or not. I don't think you do. I may be wrong.
Yeah, onslaught, you keep 5 dice.
Oh, 5. Okay.
Yeah. Strike Force, 2,000 points, you keep 4. Incursion, 1,000 points, you keep 3.
Good deal. And then Combat Patrol, you keep 2, right?
Yeah, just 2.
Yeah. Which is fair. I always thought that was a fair mechanic.
So that's one that it actually scales for the battle size.
Yeah, it does. I think that balances that out a little bit. I've never played Onslaught in 9th edition, mostly because just no one plays it in my local group.
You need to have like a whole day dedicated to it.
Yeah.
And like several players. It's an apocalypse game. You bring 3 people aside, 1,000 points each.
Right.
And do it that way.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. But yeah, that's, and to be honest with you, Strands dice, I like how they work now. And when I saw the new rule, I was almost thinking to myself, man, this just seems worse. But then I thought about it more and more, and I thought about it differently. And that's when I started to realize that it's a really powerful rule that we got in 10th edition. And I think since it's basically the same as Miracle Dice now.
Yes, that is where it's different. Now it's like Miracle Dice. Whereas in 9th edition, it doesn't matter the size of battle, you get 1 Miracle Dice per turn, and you can only spend 1 Miracle Dice per phase. That's it, no matter the army size. So you could have a combat patrol with 4 units, you can spend 1. If you're doing 3,000 points and have 25 units still left, you can still only do 1 per phase.
Right.
It kind of sucks. But now it's going to change for 10th edition, so it doesn't matter how many units you have. you can use any number of miracle dice per phase on any unit.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good quality of life change
Yeah.
because you don't have any feel bad moments when you have extra miracle dice left over, at the
Oh,
end.
I play Sacred Rose, so we get miracle dice from using miracle dice. So I have like 20 miracle dice left at the end of the game. They're all
Yeah.
like 3 and under, but it's like, oh, I've got 2 units left. Should I therefore be using a miracle dice every single phase just to have one hit automatically? And
Yeah.
you forget.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. You do forget that kind of stuff because it's declared before you roll, and if you roll, it's too late.
yeah, it's a mental load as well. It's like, oh, I'm hitting on a 2+, so surely I don't need to use one, right?
Right. You would think you don't, but then there's always that chance, man.
Yeah.
Gosh, I remember even when I was playing Eldar in 5th and 4th edition when I would have a 2+ ballistic skill on an Exarch or something.
Yep.
And I'm like, surely I don't have to use guide on this unit of Dark Reapers. Already gonna hit. And it's like ones, double ones on the Exarch. I'm like, oh my God. You know?
It's
Of course,
inevitable.
back then, yeah, it was a little bit different because you had the Tempest launcher and you had blast templates and things like that, but still, you know.
Yeah. They just, in like 4th edition, 5th edition, are they always scattered? I can't remember. Yeah, they just always
Yeah,
scattered. Didn't
they
matter your
always
ballistic skill.
yeah, if they didn't have line of sight, they just scattered away. But
Yeah.
the funny thing about Dark Reapers back then, and I have a name for them, which I won't say, but they had some really strong killing power. And I
Oh, yeah.
remember, they weren't exactly competitive at one point because at one point in 5th edition, just everybody and their mother was running vehicle spam. So they weren't good against vehicles back then. But let me tell you, Dark Reapers could just annihilate an entire squad of Space Marines like that.
That
Easy
was their
too.
one job. Kill
Yeah,
Space Marines at range, and then close range, you want Fire Dragons, and they're also your anti-tank.
yeah. And everything had a role. And Dark Reapers, no one liked Dark Reapers, man. No one. Everybody I played against, they saw those Dark Reapers, they were like, I don't like Dark Reapers. They would just tell me straight up in the most straight face possible, I don't like Dark Reapers. They're gonna die. Like, all right, all right, my friend.
Oh,
And
I've
I
got
realized,
some Dark Reapers, but they are from. Did you ever play Space Crusade, which was like um, using tactical squads similar to Space Hulk on a Space Hulk?
you know what? I
But
never did. I never played
uh,
Space.
it was its own game, and it got an Eldar attack expansion, and that came with 10 guys, which kind of looked like Guardians, but also kind of looked like Avengers, and they
Mm-hmm.
could also have some heavy weapon things. So
Yeah.
I had like 3 boxes of them. 2 of them are Avenger squads. One of them became the Dark Reaper squads, a
Oh,
unit of
cool.
7, but it works.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah. Is
very
that back when they could
easy to
do the Web
paint.
of Skulls? Was that the Web of
Yeah,
Skulls?
that's right.
Yeah, I
That was
remember
that
those.
time.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. The good old Web of Skulls, the weapon that would never do anything except if we were within 12 inches.
Yeah, Dire Sword. You wanted a Dire Sword at that time. And then
Yeah.
more
Oh, yeah.
recently, it's like get your
Oh,
spear and your shimmer shield, or just go dual wielding shuriken catapults if you're going to be an
oh,
Avenger
yeah.
XR.
You had to go Dire Sword back then. I do remember the Dire Sword rules were absolutely just terrifying. Just take a leadership test or die. It was
Yep,
basically just that. Like
it was,
it's
yeah, instant death
insane,
on a sword.
instant death, and it was so funny because a lot of Space Marine characters and stuff had leadership 10, but the amount of times I've seen people fail that back in the day was so staggering that it was like I might as well try this one
Oh,
12
yeah.
point Dire Avenger or whatever. Well, it was a little more expensive than that with the Dire Sword, but 20-point Dire Avenger can kill this like 150-point character. Yeah, let's do that.
And I always found characters to be so expensive in the earlier editions, and they didn't do a lot because it was only until really 8th edition when they started being force multipliers.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're a dude that hits hard.
Yep. They would basically do nothing. I remember a lot of people just ran your basic HQ choice and that's it. If you wanted to have
Yeah,
fun, you run a special character, but If you're trying to be competitive, you never ran that.
It
Yeah.
was like a veteran sergeant in third edition because they were an option. Otherwise, maybe a librarian, then you get some psychic stuff out of it,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
or a
That's
chaplain,
the psychic
then you
hood.
could have
Yeah. The
hatred.
psychic hood was where it was at back then. I mean, that's why you took the librarian for that psychic hood. That 4+, just get out of here. Your psychic power is nullified. Get out. You know,
Yeah,
that was pretty
not so
powerful.
good
Now,
more
obviously, they're not
recently.
have that, but it was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
whereas more recently it's like exarchs, not exarchs, autarchs, for the multiplying things just to hit a bunch of units. Then you can do your ulthwe waves, very defensive, and slowly move up with an autarch because you can hit 4 or 5 units if you've got the
Right.
6-inch range.
Yeah, because that aura is pretty powerful. Yeah, true. Back in the day when autarchs came out in 4th edition, everybody was excited about them, but then they
Hmm.
quickly realized that they sucked.
Yeah, I remember killing one instantly with a plasma pistol shot
Yep,
because strength 7 causes instant death to a toughness 3 model.
that's right. Yeah, that was the thing back then. It was really difficult for autarchs to do anything, and they
Yeah,
had to
so
join. They could only join a certain unit too. You know, if you gave them wings, they could only join hawk units. If you gave them
yes,
the
a
warp
jump
jump
pack, then
generators,
it's
they could
only the
only.
spiders.
Yeah, it was just very like hard to run them. It was very hard to
Yeah,
run them, but they were
we'll see
fun.
how it works in the next edition because 10th edition may say they can go with pretty much anything.
Yeah, I think they're going to be really good. I actually think autarchs for once are going to be a competitive choice. I think now they're good. You can take them and you can succeed with them. It's just that they're a little bit command point intensive because you have to give them the certain relics and warlord traits. But I think
Mm.
with enhancements becoming free, and I think GW should reveal those pretty soon. But with
Yeah, they
enhancements
haven't
coming,
actually mentioned anything. I know
yeah,
it's going to be, what, 3 per army and no more than 1 per character?
yeah, yeah, that's what it looks like. And I'm thinking an autarch with a free ability, and if it has some cool special rules like it gets to refund command points on stratagems, I'm thinking that's an auto win.
Yeah,
You know,
that suits it.
free fire and fade. Let's go. You know,
Or it's going to be once per battle round, use a stratagem on its unit that its bodyguard is for like free.
yeah, which would be awesome.
I will say, at the moment for canonesses, they're the same. You can only really run them with a relic or a good warlord trait.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's kind of transition a little bit because I know you wanted to talk about miracle dice and fate dice and maybe the differences between them.
Yeah,
Uh,
so 10th edition, we've talked a bit about the 9th edition ones, how Battle Sisters, I think, just get a worse deal compared to the Eldar. Because when the Eldar Codex came out, that was when they FAQ'd the Battle Sisters to say, oh, you actually need more miracle dice to function. So it wasn't just
right.
1 per battle round, it was 1 per player turn,
Yeah.
because so few of them were 6s.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That wasn't a very powerful ability. Yeah, I remember that. I remember Sisters being a little on the weak side at that point. But then they
I
they got
mean,
really strong in ninth edition though for a while
they
because
they
of
had a moment when they were about average. I don't think they've ever been overpowered or like, oh, you put sisters on the board and people go, no, that's not okay.
no, I don't think they've ever been overpowered. And that's just because I think the way Sisters of Battle function, it's kind of like a cap, You can't go above a certain amount with them because of the fact that yes, their units are strong, but there's counterplay that you can utilize against them. They're not impossible to defeat. They don't have things that you just say, "Oh, well, I can't do anything against this or about this."
Yeah,
Some factions do. And I
they haven't
remember,
got the range of like unit
yeah,
range to be able to pick things like that. They'd lack any kind
right.
of long range shooting apart from the Exorcist, which is really
Yeah,
bad at the moment. It's meant to be anti tank, and I use it for anti heavy infantry because that's about all it can kill.
yeah, it's not very good. Not very
Yeah.
good. It was, you
Uh,
know what though? It was much better in like 4th edition. It was
yes.
much. It used to be so good. it was just like firing off D6 missiles that ignored line of sight every single turn. D6 crack missiles. It was
Yep,
insane.
so strength 8 going straight through pretty much every armor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It had AP3. It could go through
That's it.
basically any power armor, and unless you were firing at a Terminator, you were getting through vehicles pretty easily. It was pretty good. I remember fearing that thing as an Eldar player because strength 8 versus, armor value 12 of my vehicles was just like the sweet spot. Like if you could get to strength 8 but didn't go over it, that was like the most cost-effective thing you could field against an Eldar player. And it
they
was
were
insane.
quite cost effective. I mean, at
Yeah,
the moment, it's a lot. It's like 150, 160 points.
Yeah, they're terrible now, dude.
Oh yeah, because my Exorcist, I have it so that the missiles, it's a metal piece on a plastic model. It falls off all the time. So I've got it so it comes on and off, and I can swap it out for a little immolator turret.
Yeah.
So I'm running it as an immolator with 3 heavy bolters at the moment.
Good deal. That's
it's
the
half
better
the price.
way to run it. Yeah.
And it still kills heavy infantry.
Yep, still does the same exact thing because heavy bolters are actually good at dealing damage to Space Marines. Yep.
Yeah. So, Miracle Dice in 10th and Fate Dice, they seem to be pretty much identical.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only difference is how they're generated, and that's it.
Yeah, so Eldar gets them at the start of the game, but then Guardians can bring on more.
Yeah, they control an objective. So they do have to do something to do it. Same thing with Sisters, though. And I think the one thing, I was comparing them the other day, and I was really looking at it. And I was thinking to myself, what's going to be the power spike in both armies? Because obviously both armies are going to have a moment in the game where they're at their most powerful. And I think the only real difference that you're going to see from Miracle Dice and Fate Dice is when those dice are going to be at their strongest.
So Eldar at the start?
Yeah, Eldar, I think, turns 1 to 3, they're going to be at their most powerful.
And Sisters later game, because currently we have to die to get Miracle Dice.
Exactly. So turns 3, 4, and 5, I think, are where Sisters are going to shine. But also because you can take, I can't remember what the thing is called. I think it's called a Rosarius or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it's something that attaches to the Battle Sister units. It's like an icon or something like that.
The Simulacrum Imperialis.
That's what it is.
The big stick.
Yeah.
A big stick with a flag.
Yep. There we go.
That means that you get an extra Miracle Dice if you kill a unit. So on a regular Battle Sister unit, not so great. Celestians, probably. I can see it being on Dominions as well, because it's 1 box for those 3 units. But you won't get it on the heavy weapon Retributors. Yeah,
I think that's going to be the key right there. I think running those units, Celestians, I think are going to be awesome. I think those things are going to be really good. Or not Celestian. What are they called? The heavy weapon versions? The heavy weapon
Retributors.
Retributors.
They're like the Havoc's Devastator squad.
Yeah, they're going to be good with that ability if they have it. I think every Battle Sister unit will probably have access to it.
No, I think it'll be what's in the box. Technically, the Retributors are a separate box set, even though I built mine out of the regular Battle Sister squad, and that doesn't come with a Simulacrum. It just has the 2 little reloading cherubs.
That's a shame then. That would be really powerful if they could do that.
Yeah, so otherwise, the Dominions, which are the fast attack special weapon squad, get in there with flamers and melter guns, then use that to generate more Miracle Dice.
Yeah, those are going to be good as well, I think. I think that whatever can kill units quickly is going to be good for that.
As always in 40k.
Yeah. Whatever can just go in there and kill immediately is going to be good, So, you're going to be able to generate more Fate Dice throughout the battle, whereas I think Eldar are really going to be mostly generating them in the early game. Thing about Eldar is they're fragile, and they tend to die easily, and they tend to be easy to get off of objectives. So I think Eldar Guardians, they can survive a couple turns of indirect fire.
At least because there's 10 of them.
Yeah.
Or 10 plus with the weapon platform.
With the weapon platform, yeah. And now what you can do, actually, is you can just kill off the weapon platform if you wanted to.
That was always the way.
Yeah.
Had a better save normally.
okay, yeah, I'm just going to kill off the weapon platform early, and then I don't care about the whatever's on it. I'm just using these
Yeah,
guys for wounds on an objective.
absolutely. That's why
So
I'm thinking a lot of people right now, Eldar players around me, are running the Wraithguard, because they're hard to remove from an objective.
yeah, they
So
are.
they're the ones you can sit on the objective and use everything else, the fire dragons, or just even more wraiths, teleporting
Yeah.
wraiths to do the killing.
Oh, absolutely. Wraiths are cool. I think, gosh, I used to run a full Wraith army back in the day when you could take
Yeah.
Wraithguard as troops. I mean, I guess you could do the same thing now, but
Yes. Arcs
it
of
was
Omen
just,
detachment.
yeah, it was just so much different back then because if you ran Wraiths back then, there was really nothing that could touch you outside of like plasma, you know? If you
Yeah,
were,
and toughness
kind
8
of,
was invulnerable basically to
oh, yeah,
strength 4 and below.
yep. It was just impossible to kill Wraith Lords unless you had the tools for them. And I
Yep,
remember
I
going
remember
against
playing that
many a
and
player.
disliking
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No one liked it because once a Wraith Lord got into combat, there was no fallback mechanic back then. You
There
just were there
was,
until you die.
yeah,
That was it.
it was only 7th edition. Then there was our weapons are useless, so if you actually couldn't physically hurt it, then you could choose to fall back, but you might still get wiped out.
Yeah, you might get caught up with, which against Eldar was likely because their initiative was not bad.
Oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
average best initiative in the game, 5 or
Yeah.
6.
Yep. 5 and 6, and even Wraith units were 4. So,
Mm-hmm.
I
Better
mean, they
than
were still
Battle
good.
Sisters, Guardsmen, all the rest.
So you
Yeah.
could easily catch a Marine squad. Now, you wouldn't be able to run a Marine squad down because of their special rule, but you
Yeah,
could just keep
they
catching
have.
them.
Yeah.
They shall know
Okay.
no fear. That's what it used to do. It was kind of
That
insane.
was it. Automatically regroup, can't be swept in combat.
Yeah, yeah. That was a really cool rule, but it rarely came into play. Very rarely. Just
Yeah, I would
because of the
say you're
fact
right.
that, yeah, I mean, against other factions maybe, but against Eldar especially, you were just going to kill the unit. There was no like
Yes.
in between. Like either you killed them or you failed epically and you just got wiped out in return. There was no like ifs, ands, or buts about it. You were just done.
I think there's only once that didn't happen, and that was some striking scorpions fighting scouts, and it was
Yeah,
awkward.
yeah, that's an awkward engagement, isn't it? When you fail against scouts, it's like, oh, okay, you're gonna do any damage back?
Nope.
No, okay, we're stuck
Yeah.
here. Neither of us can fall back, so we're just stuck in combat. Which I guess
There's
was, I
something,
mean,
though.
yeah, I mean that's something, you know, better than just being out.
Um, do you have a preference then, striking scorpions or howling banshees?
I think both units are great. I don't have a preference per se, except they're good at different things. And
Mm-hmm. Light infantry
you
or
know,
heavy infantry?
yeah, exactly. And with striking scorpions, I think their alpha strike is really fun if you can get it off. If you can't, they're a great deterrent in the late game. You can move them into reserve and kind of keep your enemy on their feet, play some mind games with them. With Howling
Mm-hmm.
Banshees, they're a great deterrent tool. I don't really use them in alpha strike lists because I found that against players that know what they're doing, they're just going to screen you out. You're never going to be able to cloud strike in and, obliterate a high value target. But you put them in a wave serpent, you keep them back behind some ruins, and you say, okay, whatever you move onto that objective in no man's land is not going to be there in the next turn.
Yep.
And that's how you use them. And then no one wants to do that, you know? So I've even seen people say, okay, well, the Howling Banshees are going to kill my infantry. I'm going to put this tank on the objective.
On
I'm
your
going to put this
objective, yeah.
dreadnought. It's like, okay, I charge them into dreadnought. Oh, there's no way you're going to kill this dreadnought.
The
Um, we'll see, and then it's
banshees
like,
are doing pretty good right now.
yeah, they're a top tier unit right now. They're really good. They're good in almost every list. Even lists that don't synergize with them, they're good in because they just kill whatever they hit. Now, here's the thing about Howling Banshees, though, is that I don't think they're going to be quite as good in 10th. I think they're going to be nerfed. Combat looks worse in general, from what
I'm
I've seen.
seeing shooting looks to be the more favorable way to go.
Yeah. And I think it's been like that in 40K for a long time. I think the last time Assault was really overpowered was 4th edition.
Yeah.
And
Then
that's
it
it.
was
5th
heavy
edition.
consolidation into the other
Oh, yeah.
units. Yeah.
Oh, that was insane. It was D6. So you just,
Yep.
if you got a 5, it was just like, oh, I'm running into this unit way over here now. I'm going to fight them the next turn. I have higher initiative than you, so I'm just going to blow through this unit as well. It was
Yep,
insane.
and there's nothing you can do because there's no fallback option.
There's no fallback generally, and there's no, you know, there's no retreat either. You can't do anything about it, and you're just stuck, basically. Because if you have a lower initiative than the enemy unit, there's no way you can strike first. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was insane. I remember I played against this one guy who was running I think he was running like 120 tactical Marines or something like that. And I remember...
That's okay. That's Space Marine Horde. That's how I sometimes do it.
Yeah, he ran a horde of Space Marines, and his argument was that what's the point of running other stuff when everything's the same? Okay, true.
Okay.
Everything in the Space Marine book at the time was the same. So
it is
like,
variations on dude in power armor.
Yeah, dude in power armor with heavy weapon. Dude in power armor with special weapon. Dude in power
armor that's inside other power armor.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all the same anyway. So he just ran a bunch of Space Marines. And I remember I was running a unit of Harlequins at the time. And
okay.
Yeah, the Harlequins in 4th edition were nasty because they had rending. And rending back then, basically on a 6 to, I think it was hit, they scored an automatic wound which ignored armor, which was insane, right? Think lethal hits now, but ignoring armor.
I think it was the other, it might have been more like devastating wounds. 6 to wound, ignored armor.
I think that was 5th edition. They changed it. In 4th edition,
it was along those lines.
Yeah, it was insane though. And I remember they had like 4 attacks apiece, and I was running a full unit. And back then, you couldn't shoot them unless you were within like a certain distance. So I got them into combat and wiped out the first tactical Marine unit. And then I just swept through his entire army in 2 turns.
It was pretty much just that one Harlequin unit and then another.
Yep. It was just killed one unit after another, after another, after another, and he couldn't do anything about it because they were initiative 6. So even his leaders were fighting last. Couldn't do anything.
A Space Marine captain, initiative 5.
Yep. Couldn't do a damn thing about it. And he basically just had to surrender after that, saying there's nothing I can do. He was moving his units as far away as he could, as fast as he could, but
they're still faster.
They were still faster, and I still had other units that were on the battlefield. So it was hard for him. But yeah, that was brutal. And I think
that was not a balanced edition. Not by any means.
It wasn't. It was definitely not balanced. It was fun.
Yeah,
but not
fun once. It's fun once for one player, and then never again.
Yes, exactly. And then it's like, okay, well, this unit's broken, but yeah, absolutely. And then they changed it, and I remember thinking combat was so bad after that, and ever since, it's not really ever gotten to that level.
Yeah, it was when you could have Overwatch automatically, which was 6th through to 8th edition. That took a lot out of it. Now it's a command point, so that's where one Eldar unit is really going to suffer. Not banshees, but one Eldar unit. Right,
exactly. And yeah, now there are ways to ignore Overwatch and stuff, but I think in 10th edition as well, Overwatch is it could be used at the end of the movement phase.
Which is, I think, when everyone's going to use it, because I see no reason to use it in the charge phase instead of the movement phase, unless you don't have line of sight.
Right. It's never going to happen unless you don't have line of sight. That's exactly
so it's just get rid of the enemy shooting as well as the enemy charging.
Right. And Overwatch, it's going to be a big part of the game. A lot of people, I think, say, oh, well, there's going to be command point issues and stuff. But from what I've seen, there seems to be a lot of refunded abilities and stuff. I think you're going to see people using it more often than you think. Especially on units that can either auto hit or units that are able to just deal really heavy damage.
The ones I was thinking of, well, that's where you're getting the difference between maybe Battle Sisters and Eldar in the next edition. Because Eldar won't be running lots of small units to get those reroll to hits and rerolls to wound per unit. Whereas Battle Sisters clump up, let's go with the largest size that we possibly can. We don't know the Battle Sister unit size. Could be 10, could be back to 20. And do like heavy firepower from one good unit.
Oh, absolutely. That's how I think it's going to be. I think that's going to be the optimal way
for Overwatch.
Oh, yeah. Flamers are going to be powerful. Put those right in the front. so that you can always have range.
Yeah.
Don't put them in the
'Cause
back, because then they're not going to have any range to deal with certain targets. But yeah,
the enemy can't shoot you and get rid of the flamers if the flamers shoot first.
exactly. Absolutely. It's going to be brutal. Flamers and sisters go hand in hand,
Yep. Part of the
just like
Holy
in real life.
Trinity.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's that one and the ignore one failed battle shock test. Those are the two that I think are one of the best command point abilities.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really good too. Yeah.
I assume
One
you saw
command
the
point,
leaks.
auto pass. Oh yeah. Of course.
Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just in case there was anything Eldar related.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in case, everything's related to Eldar in some way. And that's
Oh,
how I
yeah,
kind
it's
of
like,
look at the rules,
yeah, here's a new thing for like Custodes. This is how it affects Eldar. I did a thing where they're the Demons faction focused. I don't play Demons. They're really not that popular in my community. So I talked
Mhm.
about Genestealer Cult via the Demons because they're a
Yeah.
faction that plays quite similar.
Yeah.
The sudden appearing from different board edges, all that sort of jazz.
Yeah, they do play similar. Truth be told, though, I haven't played a single game against Genestealer Cult in my entire life.
They
And
are
that's just,
a less popular faction. There's
they're
me and
really,
one other guy who occasionally played them at the club.
yeah,
And he plays them more like Imperial Guard, but with a couple of monster units. I
yeah.
do more, let's have Genestealers, just go through the generations, at least one squad of every generation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. You got to show
It's,
the progression, That's
I
important.
will say, if you lose as Genestealer Cult, you know that it's your own fault.
Yeah, they're hard to play, too. I've
Oh,
looked
yeah.
at the rules. They seem very hard to play. They're very fragile. They remind me of kind of Dark Eldar.
Yes.
You know?
It's that sort of fragility even more because unless you do one particular sub-faction, there's no invulnerable saves.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
community
You make a
says they're the
mistake,
hardest to play. I think they're the hardest to play. Henry Cavill said it was Custodes that's the hardest to play.
Well, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, he said the low model count is what makes them really difficult. You have to be on a lot of objectives with not a lot of guys. And I
I
was
could
just
see that.
thinking of the Imperial Knights and then, Genestealer
Yeah.
Cult. Because
Yeah.
you can throw your best Genestealer unit at one Custodes guy and it'll bounce off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Custodes are an army that I've played a couple times. They're tough, but it's weird because I've never had trouble with my Eldar against armies that are very small. I've never had issues with them. In fact, I find it easier to envelop and easier to kind
Yeah,
of maneuver around them than other armies. I
Eldar
think,
like fighting elite armies,
yeah, they really do. I think they really take them apart pretty easily.
but then they'll
Um,
struggle against Imperial Guard because
yep,
one-to-one Guardian to a Guardsman, roughly the
yep,
same abilities, different points values.
exactly. You have to play a totally different game against Imperial Guard. You have to play a totally different. You have to have a different mindset going into it, you know. But yeah, Imperial Guard being the first army I've ever played, and an army that I've honestly kind of always kept up with as far as their strategies and tactics and so forth. I'm comfortable against them. A lot of Eldar players are not, but I've played as them. I've played against them so many times that I'm more used to them. But yeah, they do struggle sometimes against Imperial Guard, for sure.
And the tanks, that you have to have enough lancers to get rid of the tanks.
Oh yeah, and honestly, lances usually just bounce off in my experience. You know, really, in my opinion, the best tool against Imperial Guard tanks is fire dragons.
Yeah, and then
And
it's the whole Eldar specialism thing of you've got to have it hit the tank and not a chimera because the guys inside will then be able to kill your fire dragons very
right,
easily.
right, and in some cases, fire dragons with enough support can actually kill 2 Leman Russ battle tanks as a unit of 5.
In the current
I've
edition?
actually found this in 9th edition. I don't know about 10th. I don't even think they'll
Yeah.
be able to do it in 10th edition. To be honest, I think it's going to be a 1-for-1. But in 9th
Yeah.
edition, they can kill 2 easily too.
Okay.
Yeah, guide. Think about this. Guide, right? You have guide. You have access the Doom, but you don't technically need it if you have enough good strands dice, right? If you have strands dice to wound, you don't really
Oh,
need
you're
it.
playing ulthwe?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love them with ulthwe. It's fantastic. The reason being is because you can get all those strands dice, and they're a great trading unit. So you can kind of keep them in the back until they're needed, and then you can, disembark them 3 inches from a transport.
Yep.
Move 7 inches. You can
So
even
there's a
advance
10-inch
if you
move
want,
already.
because they have an advance of D6, and they can still shoot at full ballistic skill because they have battle focus.
Oh, yes.
And then you shoot them, and you can shoot them up to 16 inches because the Exarch power gives it +4 range. So you can actually hit units that reveal themselves pretty early in the game with fire
That's
dragons.
crossing from your deployment zone all the way into the enemy deployment zone.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they come out to shoot, or if they come out to try to position themselves to get good line of sight on you, you're like, all right, you move up your fire dragons, you shoot them, and that's
Yeah.
it. You can.
They haven't even left their deployment zone. They thought they were totally safe from those short-range melter weapons.
Yeah, exactly. And it's ends up being not that short of range, all said and done.
Yeah, the
But
only
yeah,
thing the
fire
sisters
dragon.
have for that is dominions, that you've got to move 6 inches before the game starts, then move and advance, and then you can have a go
Yeah.
with a couple of
Yeah,
melter
sisters
guns.
are funny. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing, though. You can't take the whole unit of melta guns, and I think that's what makes fire dragons special, is that the whole unit can take melta weapons, you know.
It's the specialism.
So
Yeah, that's what I'm not
yeah,
liking about the Primaris Marines. It's like you're now playing Eldar, but in power armor. Everything is hyper specialized. 10
yeah,
guys
that's
with
what
just flamers, 3 guys with just melter guns.
right. Back in the day, if we were having this conversation when I was in high school, I would have said that's bull. That's stupid. They're basically just copying Eldar, but like exactly what you said, in power armor.
Yep.
But I don't know. I mean, I think the thing is, though, is that you have to factor in the cost of each unit. I typically think that Primaris tend to be more expensive in general. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
5 fire dragons is about 120 to 140 points, depending on how you equip them.
So that's what,
And
3 Inceptors. That's the jump pack guys with plasma
right,
guns.
right.
And that's only giving them
And
bolt guns.
yeah, exactly. Exactly, right? You give them the bolt guns because the plasma's too
Too
expensive.
expensive.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, that's great, but at what cost? You have a huge point sink into a unit that can easily die. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's similar to Eldar too, but
It's
I
not,
digress.
yeah, it's a lot more points to be resistant, and you're not getting any more damage output. That was the
Exactly.
problem with the the troops choice that are the Primaris Marines
Right.
in Gravis armor. I can't remember what they're called. Probably just heavy intercessors.
Yeah.
A lot of points for a slightly better bolt gun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the cost effectiveness of that, it doesn't add up. That's why mostly people just take the regular intercessors.
Yeah.
Or they just take tactical Marines. I mean, I have a
I
buddy who
just take
won't touch
tactical
Primaris.
Marines.
Yeah, he won't touch Primaris intercessors because he says that it's better to just have more bodies on the field than it is to have 1 AP extra.
Yeah.
And I can't
And
argue with that. I'm like,
I
okay.
mean, I don't think anyone runs that kind of bolt gun because it's at the moment it's the choice. You have the sniper gun, which is good, -2 AP and 2 damage, or you have the assault bolter, which is 3 shots, and then you can advance and fire that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think how they did intercessors in 10th edition is pretty good. I think, the bolt rifle now is
Yes, one fire selector button rather than 3 different
yep.
weapons.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty solid, I think.
I approve as well, but they announced that rule the day after I finished my 3 separate units of intercessors.
Oh, that's funny.
The
That's
timing couldn't have been more unperfect.
It's all good, man. I think they're going to be solid. I think what they're trying to do with a lot of troops choices in this edition is they're trying to make them comparable, so that
We're also
they
seeing
trade. Yeah, they
not
trade
just the
about even.
trading, it's enhancing the army special rule. So that's where Guardians and Sisters give you more miracle/fate dice.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because they benefit the army besides just being able to hold objectives, which I like. I'm finally glad that Guardians have a role now, because
Yeah.
before it was just they just weren't good at holding objectives in ninth edition. They weren't good at dealing damage typically. Even with the Shuriken special rule, there were just better units.
Even
You
with
know,
like ulthwe Black Guardians, when that became a
right?
command point,
Yeah,
it kind of killed it off.
yeah. Because to me, it's like, why would I spend a command point to become as good as Dire Avengers in shooting when I could just get Dire Avengers? There was just
Yeah,
no
that
point to it.
was the upgrade because Dire Avengers
Yeah,
get extra range, extra AP, and Exarch abilities.
yeah. Or I could just trade it for the speed of a Wind Rider, and it's the same thing. So you just never saw Guardians.
Yeah.
Objective secured, having that ability wasn't. It was good, but it wasn't that great with Eldar because nothing was going to hold an objective for more than one turn. So you couldn't except Wraithguard, and Wraithguard don't have objective secured innately. They can get it through Will of Azurian, so that was the only way you could give them objective secured. So there's no real point.
The
But
Rangers have it? Are they troops or are they?
yeah, they have it.
They have
They
it.
have it.
So people were picking 5 Rangers as their backfield objective holders because it's cheaper
Right.
than Guardians.
Right.
And you
But
get some
even
sniper
then,
shots if you've got line of sight.
yeah, true. I mean, Rangers were the optimal choice in every list just because of what they could do. They could come in from reserve in turns 4 and 5 via Phantasm, which is an excellent little trick that you could do with the stratagem. Basically, because it was at the start of the battle round instead of before the battle begins. Just like the Harlequin reserve ability, where you can jump back in reserve, they weren't limited to coming in on turns, 2 or 3. They could actually come in also on turns 4 and 5. That was a great way to kind of get them in the backfield scoring points. Guardians couldn't do that. Well, I mean, they could, but they couldn't do it as effectively. And, Rangers could also screen out units. There was plenty of games that I've had that I was going against a really fast, hard-hitting army, something like
Mm-hmm.
White Scars.
Yeah.
And I would just string out my Rangers 2 inches apart from each other in front of half of his army. And he would say, oh, great.
I can't. Yeah, no deep
I have
striking
to
there,
either move
no
around
rushing
these
in.
guys with my bikes, which bikes are pretty big models. They're on pretty big
Yeah,
bases, pretty bulky. So,
annoyingly, at one time, the Genestealer Cult, not meta, but just in tournament, was to take all of the bikes and make a perfect line that you couldn't walk through, and
yep.
just hold the enemy army off for like a turn just by doing that until your
Yeah.
massive number of Genestealer Cult reserves came in. They're
Yeah,
definitely an
absolutely.
army that has a set time when they win
Yeah,
the game or not.
absolutely. Well, that's funny. That's like the old Kroot thing, back in like fourth and
Oh
fifth
yeah,
edition.
1
Using
million
Kroot.
Kroot.
Yeah, just, Tau lists were just Kroot. As their troops. They wouldn't even take fire warriors back then. It was just Kroot, and it was like your heavy guns, and that's it. And the Kroot would just block you off so you couldn't move, and then the heavy
Yeah,
guns would just shoot you until you died. And
there
that was it.
was there was a tournament case where someone had Kroot and flooded the board with Kroot, and the opposing player was a Space Marine player with everything in drop pods.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be not deploying inside an enemy unit. They called the tournament organizer over and said, "Yeah, you can't deploy. The Kroot are
Yeah,
there. Tau player wins."
yeah, that's it. Exactly. I've heard of that battle. It was hilarious. Yeah, and then there was there was a situation where a Dark Angels player was running, a list, and he had all of his guys in reserve, and the dude just again put Kroot all around the board edges. There was
Oh
nothing
yeah,
the opponent could do about it. Actually, those cases are the reason why GW now basically bans people from infiltrating units in your opponent's deployment zone. That's
and
exactly the
also
reason
why
right
you can't have more than a certain number in
there. Yep.
reserve, so you actually have
Yep.
something on the board.
Exactly, because that would be insane if you just lost turn 1. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's
Yes,
really
as a
fun.
one-off, it's funny, but at that point you then say, "Okay, let's play again." If it's not a tournament, and
Right.
actually have a game.
Yeah, let's have a real game, please. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
having
I've
a
had
game
games
where
like
it's
that.
like you put one Titan on the board, and that's the game.
Yeah, exactly. I remember back in the day, I played a game against a guy, and his whole 500 point army was a Baneblade. And
Oh yeah, they were exactly 500 points.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That was his 500-point list. And
And he
obviously,
couldn't just win by objectives really at the
right,
time, because you could, if
right.
you killed the enemy army, that was it.
Yeah, it was just if you kill him, you win. So he had this Baneblade, and I remember thinking to myself, man, this must be like, he must be breaking some sort of rule with this. But I just let him play. I'm like, all right, let's play.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my Eldar list had a unit of 5 fire dragons in it, my 500-point list. And I went first. And the first thing I did was I moved up my wave serpent. I dropped
Yep.
out my fire dragons, and and I shot at his Baneblade and killed it in one turn. And
There we go. And then did you say,
that was the
okay, let's
game.
go again? Or
Yeah, I was like, would you like to run something else? Because this is how it's going to go every single game, probably. He was like,
mm-hmm.
yep, okay. Can't run this against Eldar.
Yeah. Currently, the Baneblade, well, there's a thing where it's more like theories and rumors. It's not great in 30k Horus Heresy, supposedly because the game rules for that were made bad because of the way sales work. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
40k kit. So the people who
Yeah,
work on Horus Heresy wouldn't get any like support and money from selling Baneblade kits. So they just
right.
made them not as good as a very similar Space Marine. Can't remember which super heavy tank it was, but that one's amazing for like
Yeah.
slightly less points.
Yeah, I could see that. That's how GW rolls, man. They make
Yeah.
things worse or better depending on what their outlook is for
Internal,
profit,
yeah.
you know.
Oh yeah. New
Oh man,
codex,
I
better
mean,
units, new unit, it's
absolutely.
amazing. Then they went
Yep.
too far with Votan.
And sometimes I think some of these nerfs just come out of the game designer just playing casual games with each other and just saying, man, that's OP, that should be nerfed, man. And they just nerf it, you know?
Yeah, supposedly
Like,
they don't have playtesters anymore, like official playtesters.
right, right. I mean, I'm sure some of these guys are in the back rooms playing games of Warhammer and just chilling, and they're just like, man, that's OP. They're having a pint. They're like,
They
Wraithguard with
do
B-sides?
the
Oh,
same theory
that's
hammer stuff that we do
OP. Yeah.
over like in the pub and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like they're drinking and playing and just like, oh, this unit's OP, gotta nerf it, and our next balance date is late, you know?
Yeah, like with the demons, I know the flamers were very powerful. The unit I really hated was the beasts of Nurgle, because you've got to kill them in one
Yeah.
turn, and they're really tough, and they can eat
Yeah.
their way through a Khorne Berserker squad pretty easily.
Yeah, the beasts of Nurgle are pretty nasty. Um, if they can get into combat. If they can't, they suck, obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that was another unit that was pretty strong that they didn't touch, I think, at all.
Demon armies became popular at my club once someone got a 3D printer file for the Greater Demons. They look
Oh
much
yeah,
nicer than the
yeah.
Games Workshop ones.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. There's a
And
lot of 3D printing out there that's better than what GW can make.
for like
And
tanks and monsters, definitely not so
yeah,
much for the regular infantry. So that's why
right.
I'm like, it's okay to 3D print. Would you
Yeah,
steal a Games Workshop rule from the internet? Would you
yeah,
3D print a handbag? That sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
3D print a tank, not so much the infantry, because you're just
Yeah,
exchanging money for time.
right.
It's not as much worth it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, bigger stuff, obviously easier to 3D print. Stuff with less detail, easier to 3D print. Also,
Yeah.
easier to, I'm not, saying this in a bad way, but easier to get away with it in games
Mm-hmm.
and also in events and stuff like that. Because if you have a 3D printed model that looks like a 3D printed model, you may not be able to field it. But if you 3D print something that's more reasonable, you might actually be able to get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, most events, I checked with my community, none of them have gone to an event run by Games Workshop. So you can
Yeah.
use 3D printed things there.
Yeah, true. I mean, even events run by games. I mean, I'm sure they're not checking every single model to make sure that it's,
Yeah, there's no arms
100%
done.
GW. Yeah, it's just if it's obvious. Um, if it's obvious, they're gonna say no. If it's not, they're not gonna care. It's just that simple. And I've had buddies that have been in, GW sponsored events, and they said, yeah, my models weren't even checked, and like I have a lot of 3D printed special weapons in my army, you know?
Yeah. You've got to
So
keep up with the demand for special weapons.
yeah, exactly. Like, what do I do? Buy a whole nother box just so I can switch out my grenade
Or
launchers for melter
or a
guns or whatever? I mean,
£6 upgrade set. Because that's
yeah,
how it
it's like
works
no
for
one's
like the
gonna do
Space
that.
Marines.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
one's gonna do that. They're gonna 3D print them or whatever. You know, it's silly.
Mm-hmm. So, have we covered all the Miracle Dice and Fate Dice stuff? Probably. Some of
Yeah,
it.
we've talked
As
about
much
it.
as we can for 10th edition.
Yeah, as much as we know so far. I mean, I think both factions are going to be, you know, obviously they're going to play a very, you know, they're going to play a very similar game with Fate Dice, just in different phases of the game. You know, Sisters are going to want to be able to hold objectives and keep their models alive in the late game with Fate Dice. Eldar are going to want
Well,
to pump
most of their
damage into
models.
other. Yeah, most of their models, exactly.
Because they
Not the
want to
ones
take
that
one
die.
casualty. I'm
Yeah,
still
exactly.
annoyed that it's like our Martyred Lady is the basic one. I like the Sacred Rose, so that's going into the battle, knowing you're outmatched, knowing you're outclassed, and believing the Emperor is with me, and that carries you through.
Yeah. Well, think
It's a
about it
much
this way,
better
though.
way.
I mean, I saw that ability, and I thought at first like, oh, that's not that powerful, but then I really considered it a little bit more, and with the manipulation of Fate Dice,
Mm-hmm.
or not Fate Dice, sorry, Miracle Dice,
Yeah, I know. You keep
same
switching
thing.
them
But
around.
yeah,
Eldar have Miracle Dice. The Battle Sisters have Fate Dice.
yeah, essentially the same exact thing.
Yes,
But
they
you
are.
know, I mean, you could manipulate rolls in such a way as you could keep a bunch of rolls in the late game and have a Battle Sisters unit get to exactly one death, so that it's not any over that. You know what I mean? So you can kind of manipulate it in a way to keep your units at peak efficiency at all times. You know,
The way it used to be done in
kind of.
8th edition was all of the players with Our Martyred Lady took one superior with a plasma pistol and just
Mhm.
overcharge it every time. So Seraphim dropping in, shooting twice, that's a lot of plasma pistol shots. And I think at the
Yep.
time you could have 2 plasma pistols. So it was just, come on, please roll a 1 and go down, then all of my shots are better.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly, man. That could be meta again.
It could be. I hope it isn't, because that's a really weird way to play.
It's
Like the
objectively stupid. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
like
one
the
of those things.
Tau
Yeah.
jumping off the top of buildings with their ethereal, or running in
Right.
headfirst into combat.
Yep. Exactly. It's like, okay, like this is not how it's supposed to work, but because it's in the game and because we're gamers, we're going to
Yep.
make a way to break something in the game. You know, we're going to find a cheesy way to do something. There's always going to be that. You know what I mean? Always.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just game breaking is inevitable, and you'll
It's
do
in
it
our
by
blood.
accident. You'll be like, "This is like slightly better. Oh, I see that I
Yep.
can put my retributors in an immolator and still have what 2 or 3 of them shoot out. Oh, I can just get a
Yeah.
cheap squad, have 2 multi-melters, and now I've got a unit with 4 multi-melters."
Yeah, exactly, man. You just find ways to make everything as efficient as possible. You know, just game the game and break the rules. And that's how you do it. That's how you play
Mhm.
Warhammer 40K. Find a
And of
way,
course,
find a
breaking is
crack.
not cheating.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I try to tell people this, you know, like, you know, I
This is
played a lot
technically
of,
allowed, but
yeah,
yes, you'll
exactly.
probably only play it once, and then they'll be like, "No, not again,"
No,
because
I'm
you
not
don't
going
want
to
to
play you
be
again.
that person at the club who has the
Yeah.
horrifying army.
Yeah. Oh man. I've gone against some of these guys that have those horrifying armies. I remember this one guy that I played way back in the day. He had this demon army, and I remember it was just he came into the shop. I said, "Hey, you want to play a game?" He's like, "Yeah, man. Let me get my army out." And then left the shop for a second. And everyone's looking at me like, "Dude, like, good luck, man. This guy's army so he tabled me in one turn." I'm
Oh,
like, "How the
okay.
hell does he?" I'm like, "Okay, I'm in for it, I guess." I didn't
Let's
really
double
care.
check the points on that and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it turns out everything was legit. He was just legitimately a very competitive player who was just honestly had a really good army and was really good.
Yeah.
So, turn one, I'm playing my Eldar, and
Inevitably.
inevitably, he comes up with me and he has like his whole army within 6 inches of mine, turn one.
Right.
And I'm like, he's like, all right, your turn. I was like, oh shit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to kill enough, and whatever I don't kill is going to wipe my whole army out. I was like, okay, so
Yeah.
I can kind of see why people are having issues with this player. So I swear to God, the dice gods must have been with me that day, because everything I shot at died. Back in the day, Demons had this rule called the Warp Storm table.
Yep. Which they've sort
And
of
if
got a
you rolled,
version of at the moment.
yeah, basically, and if you rolled really on it, bad things happened to your army.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what happened. It wasn't even the neutral like thing where it was just the
It
eye
wasn't, yeah,
closes.
nothing happened.
It was like everything in the army takes fucking wounds, you know? And he's just like, ah, he's rolling his dice, he's cursing up a storm, he's rolling
Yeah.
his freaking things. Just
You're going to sit
three
there and
models and
watch
every
him
squad just
remove,
wiped out.
roll dice and remove models. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, this is going to a great start. And he was like, yeah, not great, so great for me. And I remember just systematically going through every single unit. I was on the peak of my game. I didn't forget a single thing. I guided the right units. I doomed the right
Yep.
units.
And
Everything
all of them went
shot.
off.
Yep, everything went off. It was like I was also rolling good. So it was like not only was I on my game, but I was rolling hot. And people were crowding around the table because they wanted to see this guy get beat. And he's just there and he's just like sweating bullets watching it happen. And I have to give it to him. He didn't rage quit. He didn't complain. He just rolled the dice, removed the models, and he was like, the most he said was, man, that was not really getting too lucky with these rolls, you know? I
Yeah.
was like,
I
yeah,
think they
man, I'm
now have like
sorry. Dice.
guidelines on what you can say about dice rolls. Like you can't complain about your own luck or your
Yeah,
opponent's luck
exactly.
is generally considered bad form. But you can be
Yeah.
like, oh, I did it where a couple of weeks ago I was playing against Eldar Wraith guards. Got my dog Marta to attack a Farseer. She
Yep.
attacks twice, rolled the 8 dice, and I just stared at my opponent, and he nodded very slowly as we looked down and saw there was one hit on a 3+.
Yeah. I mean, what can you do? You know, it was one of those situations. So at the end of the turn, he
Miracle
basically
dice. I
had
should have used a
nothing
miracle
from.
dice.
Yeah, it was, it was insane. It was absolutely insane. He had no ability to stop. He just rolled his invul saves, which back then most demons had a 5+ invul save, but
Yeah,
that was it.
that
And
was
he
it. Yeah,
looks at
no
his
armor
army.
save, nothing else.
Yeah.
So weight of fire took them down. Imperial Guard were very good against demons.
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah, they were. Funnily enough, though, I had an Imperial Guard buddy that played against him too, and just got the same treatment. Just got completely wiped out by him. I don't know. It was just one of those things. And I remember I think he had a unit of screamers and a unit
Yep.
of Zinch. I don't know. There's some guys on discs or something like that. Disc knights, or I don't know what they're called. They're like Beyblades or something.
Beyblades, but with a sorcerer on top.
Yeah, exactly. Those things. He had those things in the back, and he just looked at me. And was like, "Well, that's pretty much good game. Let's see what I can do." And he rolls his warp storm table, and it was like a 7, and it was just the eye closes, nothing happens. And then he
Yep.
was like, well, that symbolizes this game. Nothing revived. He charged him in. I think he charged like a couple units and killed him, and then I just wiped them out. And it was like a turn 4 table. I had him tabled by turn 4, and everybody in the shop looking at it was like, what just happened? I can't believe this. Eldar are so OP, man. Don't worry, dude. This is because Eldar broken. And
Yeah.
you know what?
Oh, and
He
suddenly
could
you're
have.
the evil one, and
Yeah,
he's the one needing comfort.
exactly. I'm the OP player, right? But you know what? He didn't join in on the bandwagon. To his credit, he said, "Actually, dude, I think he's running a pretty balanced army. He's not really running anything cheesy in his list. He has his Dark Reapers. He has his, unit of jet bikes. He has a pretty balanced list. It just wasn't my game, and that's it.
Yeah.
He just packed up. He was kind of sad and left the store.
Yeah, that
I
happens.
was
After
like,
you've been
man.
playing
I
for a
was like,
couple of
what?
hours, you do get a bit, I wish I'd got something. I had a
Yeah,
similar
yeah.
in reverse experience against Dark Eldar, where it was
Oh,
my, again, Space Marines. I needed Oath of Moment. It took
yeah.
me 5 or 6 units to kill one Raider
Oh
if
man,
I
that
just had
feels
that
so good.
power. And then I had very little left to kill the units inside, one of which was Drazar.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, so
I'm
it was just
sorry.
pick a unit that dies. I've been able to take
Yeah.
him once before, but he still passed like 5 or 6 invulnerable saves on his last wound.
Oh god, dude.
It took
Yeah, that
las
just happens.
cannons to take him out.
That just literally happens sometimes, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's just Warhammer. It's just
Oh
dice.
yeah, it's
It's
fine. There's
fine.
another week.
Yeah, exactly. There's another week. There's another game. It's always fun. Even when I lose, I have fun. I've never had a game. The only time I've ever not had fun playing Warhammer 40K is when my opponent is an asshole, not when I'm
Yeah,
losing.
it's
I
it's all about the player rather than the actual
yeah,
army and stuff.
absolutely, man. Yeah, because I've played against, I mean, especially in competitive play, you go against people that are just rules mongers to the extreme. You know,
Hmm.
I've had people go so far against me in tournaments as to pre-measure and measure my own movement as I'm moving my guys 6 inches using a tape measure that says, that it's on 6. I've had
Yep.
them pull out their own rulers and check every single model as I'm moving them. It's like,
So
come
that's a fast game then.
come on, back off a little bit. Like, you can see it's 6 inches. I don't want to cheat, not for you, because I don't really care about your,
Yeah,
to be
you're the
quite
person I'm
honest.
meeting for a couple of hours once
Right.
in this
Like,
tournament.
exactly. I don't care about your comfort level, but I'm doing it because I don't want to cheat myself. Because
Yeah, you
cheating
want to
would
know
mean
you
that I didn't
win.
win fairly. Like, I want to
Yeah.
know I won a fair game. That's all. Or lost a fair game, you know?
Hmm.
So, I
Absolutely.
mean, but you come across players like that sometimes. But it's all good,
Yeah.
40K
Most of us are totally normal, nice people.
yes, most of us. I think 95% of the Warhammer community, maybe not normal, let's be real.
Okay,
None of us
a
are normal.
normal for 40k players. That level of,
Just
yes,
decent
social
people,
interaction. It
who,
varies. It
yeah,
varies.
we're decent
I
people
tend
who just
to,
want to have fun. That's
yeah,
it.
I tend to go in very hi, nice to meet you, bounce, 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 very happy, until they're like, okay, they get that sort of look of fear, and they take their morale test for themselves personally, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, I'll tone it back a bit.
yeah. How is this? Oh, social interaction. Oh no.
I
Oh, what do
know.
I do? Yeah, that's the funny thing about Warhammer. Actually, it's helped me become more social because, when I was a kid, I was very shy. So playing Warhammer
Same.
with people helped me be able to talk to people in a regular about cool stuff. A lot of kids don't get that, because at school, it's just you're working at school. You don't have a
Yep.
chance to talk to a lot of people usually in class, and it's not fun. So it's not like you're
Yeah.
having fun with other kids. So, Warhammer's been good to me over the years, and that's why I continue to play it. I think it's a great game.
Same.
Has
Even when
its
I've
moments,
had
but
times where I've like had no one to play it with, it's been a fun thing to do.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. The painting, a hobby aspect is great. There's
The
been times
lore,
as well
the
where like,
background, the
yeah,
books.
absolutely. The books are usually good if you get the right books with the right
Yes.
authors. They're good. Because I've read some really
Yeah, there
bad
was
Warhammer 40K Black Library books that I'm like, okay,
there was one book. I went to a Black Library event. I had the most recent book. I won't say which book it was. I
yeah,
got to the author, had him sign it, and he just said, "I'm sorry." And I only realized like a chapter or two later why. And it was basically, I could tell it was a rushed ending. It had been like, we need to
oh,
get this out in a week rather than in a month. So yeah, there was run on sentences,
oh God,
very
no
bad
wonder.
pacing. And it's like, oh, I see where this should have gone at this
Yeah,
sort of level. But yeah,
it's always a shame when corporations get their claws into creativity because it just absolutely murders what kind of a gem that could have been. You know?
and yeah, being an author, it's difficult. I've written a lot of stuff myself, rewrites and redo it. That's if you're allowed to do those sorts of things. Otherwise, it's like push it out. It's created. This is the child you never wanted to have, but it exists now with your name on it.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole thing. It's a whole process writing. I mean, I've tried to write some stuff, but never really got that deep into it. I have to admit, because it's difficult. You know,
Mm.
writing's very tough.
the styles. The short stories I find are better and easier to do than long ones. Like write one scene, or for your own war games, write a synopsis of the story. Start with a paragraph of what the farseer thinks beforehand, and a paragraph at the end. White Dwarf does exactly that thing. If you get
Yeah.
White Dwarf.
You know what? I used to subscribe, and I don't anymore. I don't get White Dwarf anymore, but I used to. I
I've
used
only
to.
found it more recently good because you get little inserts. So they've had a lot of boarding action cards,
Oh,
extra
cool.
tiles, extra rules,
Yeah.
scenarios, and stuff like that.
No,
But the
that's
next
really
video I'm working
cool.
on is another fan scenario. So my community will have their own scenario to play that should work in 9th or in 10th edition because I've got to make it next edition compatible.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, you do. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've recently started a project with my own Eldar. I have a bunch of older models, but I've started a new project where
It's the Eldar range. I have Caradrias from like 1992.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I have an old Baroth model. I'm actually trying to offload
The
because
current model from
yeah,
1992.
exactly. Eldar have a lot of old models, and it just never gets old, man. It never gets old with GW just not updating the range. They
Yeah.
just never update it. And here's the thing, right? Is like other armies have gotten full range updates in one codex. I like the Dark Eldar, for example, from 5th edition.
Then
They
again, they
were
didn't get much in what they started at the start of 3rd edition and then
right.
barely got a codex since then.
Yeah, exactly. They had a 2nd edition codex. I remember that, and it was
The second
actually
edition.
in
There
5th
were
edition. Man, it was overpowered. There were interactions with that 2nd edition codex that would have just completely destroyed if it was viable. If the points levels were viable and stuff, it would have been just completely broken. There was a thing called the terror effects or the horror
oh yeah,
effects or something like that. Oh my god, dude!
it was
You put
a
that on a
special weapon,
raider.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was basically you take a morale check,
Hmm.
but you take it at a huge modifier.
That is one way you can currently run Dark Eldar, where
Yeah,
it's lots of the phantasm grenades. And it's like, oh, I'm near you and I have scary trophies, so you're taking this leadership on -3, and
yeah,
suddenly 2 of your Terminators are running away.
right, exactly. But back then, it was like if you ran off the board, you died.
Yeah.
And there was no way, like if you were within a certain distance from an enemy unit, you couldn't regroup. So
Yeah,
unless,
it was all based off like
yeah,
Warhammer Fantasy rules at the time. But so now that in like 40k, it's going to be on your attacks are psychic attacks, and we've seen some of the Thousand Sun stuff. They're getting not that much. That's like here's a spell, counter the spell. It's
right,
because there's no dispelling, there's no deny the witch, nothing like that. So sisters again, one of their main rules stripped away. They don't even have
yeah,
like army-wide resistance to psychic stuff.
true. You'll
Yeah,
probably
so
get
it's
something though. I mean, you'll probably get a character or something like that that does that, or
or
something.
maybe a detachment when the
Yeah,
actual codex comes out.
right. I mean, Eldar might get something like that too. I mean, runes of warding has always been a big thing, but you know what though?
Mm,
I have to say, I saw the Thousand Suns preview. I was like, oh wow, this is going to be I mean, unless they're really expensive, they're going to
yeah,
be big contenders for competitive play. They're great. The
it
ability
was
to
when I
assemble
saw
armor.
Araman being able to just cast this unit has no armor save.
Yep, that's when I stopped and said these guys are great.
Huh.
I don't know if it's going to matter against an Eldar unit, except for Wraithguard maybe, but even then, Wraithblades with Ghost Shields and
And the
Force Sack
toughness
or whatever
and the
have the
wounds.
yeah,
Yeah, and I don't think
wounds
it gets to
toughness and
invulnerable
initial.
saves. No, it
Yeah,
doesn't. So it's just going to be good against a blob of Space Marines. It'll reduce stuff on like Terminators, but imagine fighting Custodes and all of your guns suddenly get an extra -2 AP.
right. It's going to be brutal. They're going to be a brutal faction. I mean, -2 AP just based on their guns is already really good. You know,
Yeah.
you take the icon and you get -2, like that's insane. And
Hmm.
everybody's going to take I can't see a single Thousand Suns player looking at that and saying, "Oh, I'm not going to take the icon for an additional point or an
Not
additional
even
10."
for like a
No.
defensive unit to put on a home objective, because you'll have, I don't know, Zangors or cultists, if cultists are
Yeah.
still allowed for the Thousand Suns.
Oh, big time. There's going to be definitely being
Or maybe the
cultists.
Zangors are like their replacement cultists. Because I know
Yeah.
Death Guard have Poxwalkers, but they can also take regular cultists.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
World Eaters, they have their jackals instead now.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. They may do that. I think Zangors would be cool to buff because they suck. I mean, no one
Yeah.
really takes them. I mean, that would
At
be a
one
cool
time,
unit.
they were kind of like orcs, or almost as good as orc boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At one point. At one point they were. Yeah. But yeah, that's a brutal faction focus. I'm again, like I have a little bit of a soft spot for Thousand Suns because I think they're the coolest of the Chaos armies. But I have to say they're looking pretty brutal. So
They'll probably
we'll
still
see.
just be hyper elite.
Yeah, probably. But they seem to have a lot of AP. And like I think it's funny when GW said they were reducing AP and then
I
like
know,
they
and
have
then we've
like
seen Orc Choppers get it, Eldar
yeah.
Guardians have it still. We don't know
Yeah.
about the Fire Warriors rifles, but I can't think of any unit that had AP that's now lost it.
Yeah, basically a lot of units lost their AP, but then some didn't, and then some. I mean, like Thousand Suns, they saw no change in their AP. They're still AP -2. So,
Yeah.
and then you have the Warp Flamers are still alive and well. Those are going to auto hit from Overwatch.
Overwatch
So,
indeed.
yeah, that's going to
I'm
be insane.
seeing a lot of I'm going to take a Flamer. Like at the moment, I do take Flamers in my Space Marines just in case I'm fighting Dark Eldar or Eldar.
Yeah.
But I can see a lot more Flamers becoming common on things
Oh
like
yeah,
Assault Guardians.
they're solid. They're solid. Yeah, I could see that too. Flamers are one of those units or one of those weapons I think that a lot of people discount in this edition just because the anti-infantry killing power is really weak. But in 10th edition, when everything's kind of a lower AP anyway, being able to auto hit and ignore cover is really big. So I think
Looking
you're
at like
gonna
Imperial Guards on they're getting the ignore cover back, which is nice.
Yeah.
Because they haven't had it for these last two editions. But looking at the Imperial Guard stuff and all of the different weapons, I can see they're probably going to be point costed the same. Melter gun, plasma gun, sniper rifle, flamer. They're all just getting a different rule, and the grenade launcher is great. Was it strength 9?
Grenade launcher is really good now. I remember back in the day I ran a historically accurate Imperial Guard army where I had nothing but like flamers and grenade launchers in it. There was like no high upgrade tech.
The ones that came on the sprue.
Yep. It was just like I just said, okay, these guys are like low tech Imperial Guardsmen. They come from a world that like doesn't have any plasma or melta weapons on it that they can like get a hold of. So it's just like all like slug based and like, based weapons basically.
Yeah, let's go for that third millennium charm.
Exactly. And it sucked. I remember just thinking to myself, man, I really should have just spent the extra $20 on some extra plasma guns. It was just awful. I remember just like everything was like bouncing off of everything. It was like, okay, grenade launcher, wounding on 3+, great. Or wounding on 2+ back then, Your Space Marine, okay, take your armor save, 3+, passed. I'm like, oh, It was
but
like,
that's why you needed scatter lasers, because even back in like 3rd edition, a lot of shots from strength 6, that just goes through armor through attrition.
Oh, that's been the Eldar bread and butter for a while. The scatter laser. It got nerfed, by the way. Got nerfed a little bit to strength 5. So it's
more
looking
like a heavy
little,
bolter.
Yeah, it's looking like a just increased amount of shots, but lower damage. So it's going to be really good against things like Gaunts and stuff like that, Imperial Guardsmen. It's not going to be good against anything toughness 5 or greater or has a good save. So I think it's really kind of in one place right now. It's not really super good against everything. If it was still strength 6, I would be considering it differently, but
Shuriken Cannon strength 6?
Yeah, Shuriken Cannon is still strength 6.
Yeah. And then you get your -1 and 2 damage.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have sustained. I think the Shuriken Cannon is still really powerful. I think the missile launcher.
It's going to be lances, isn't it?
It's going to be mostly lances because
at least
the Star
until
Cannon
the Codex
better,
comes out and you change detachment.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. Bright lances are going to be the bread and butter for a while. I think star cannons may be also pretty good just because of the
D3
strength 8.
shots? Yeah, D3
Two
shots,
shots.
strength 8?
Only 2 shots.
Oh, two
Only
shots.
2 shots. But AP -3, so it's good at killing like power armor.
Yeah.
So
that's your anti-heavy infantry weapon.
yeah, it's not bad. I think obviously, I wish the star cannon had higher damage. If it had damage 3, I think it'd be much better, but
You need a
strength.
grenade launcher for that sort of thing. Or an
Yeah,
auto cannon.
exactly.
The auto cannons.
Like I'm like sitting here wondering like why is the grenade launcher so good now? Like it's
Probably
better than
just
a
to
dark
balance it out.
Yeah, I guess, but then it's like now everybody's just gonna take grenade launchers.
Yeah,
It's like
maybe.
an auto include. That's funny.
Right. Okay, I think that's a good place to end it on the guns of the Eldar.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, man.
it's been very nice having you. Thank you so much for coming along. Your Discord flashing icon has worked just as planned.
Great.
So I'm glad I got that all set up properly. Yeah, so you can find Proxy Hammer on his YouTube channel. Is there anywhere else that you're active social media-wise?
Nope, just the YouTube.
Just the YouTube. Great. A dedicated YouTuber. And for all your Eldar needs, he's there. So, my darlings, my viewers, and his darlings and viewers, hope you have a great day of 40k.